Please rise for silent invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Will the clerk call the roll?
Councilmember Foley.
Here.
Councilmember Tremont.
Here.
Councilmember Bassett.
Here.
Vice Mayor Stone.
Here.
Mayor Burnett.
Here. Just a reminder, council, I have been schooled by a couple of home listeners to keep our microphones close. So all that mumbling that you do under your breath, Drew, you're just not going to be able to get away with it anymore.
Gotcha.
Okay, but keep your microphones close for the listening pleasure of our audience at home. Item 4, budget workshop discussion. Wayne, what have you got for us to make sure that we walk out of here smarter than when we walked in?
Our Finance Director, John McKinney, will be leading the presentation tonight.
All right, the well-traveled Mr. John McKinney.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. How are y'all doing this evening?
Excellent.
How are you?
Good. So I can assure you at some point in time I will lose my voice, so I've made sure I've brought drinks and cough drops. So today, the overall purpose of today's workshop is to go over revenue and expenditure outlooks. You know, there's things that are occurring within, our nation, our globe that are affecting everything that we're doing. So this is important to kind of show this to you so that when we come to you for our next workshop, the end of July, you know the basis on how we derived at everything that we've done, putting together the operating budgets. Okay, we thought we would put in here, I'm not going to go over it, but, the mission statement and your strategic plan. We've had that in all of the presentations to date, but we just want to make sure that, the public knows exactly, as we're putting the budget together, exactly what our driving force is behind everything that we do in the public trust. So today, we want to make sure that we reiterate the American Rescue Plan. Future assumptions, I want to go over the preliminary tax roll. So if you haven't seen, the property appraiser released it early last Friday. It's supposed to be out July 1st, and we got it Friday, so we have those. Go over the historical review, talk about our next step on the citywide fees, and then the final next step as we go into the final requirements on our budget workshops and our trim schedule to be compliant with Florida statute. So on the American Rescue Plan, we went through after our meeting in May, the city managers, directors and I, we went through all of the projects that have been provided to you previously that were already, funded, or they were in next year's plan for the budget. That we looked at all the projects that we thought that we could complete in a timely fashion to comply with the deadline of the American Rescue Plan, which is December 31st of 2026. We don't want to be at that last minute because things happen. So all the projects that you see here are something that we feel that we can get completed within the next 2 to 3 years with plenty of time to spare. The top 3 items you as council have already committed. So we've committed to the premium pay for police and fire, the Halifax River Sewer Force Main, and the Halifax River Water Main 16-inch project. The next 3 projects are projects that we know that have dire need for completion. The road reconstruction of Town West Boulevard, and this would only be a portion of it. So, your Public Works Director, we're looking on how we're funding the rest of it through our transportation fund. Then you have the City Center shoreline stabilization and sidewalk replacement. As y'all are aware, that was one of the projects that were part of the 2020 CDBG funding. And as I know we've spoken previously, that funding is just held up in Washington by HUD. We're trying to get that rectified. It's nothing that city staff is holding up. It's completely at the HUD level. And then also one of the things too that we put in there, if you'll recall in the CIP, we had that Jackson Street stormwater improvement project as part of stormwater. It's over a $1.2 million project, but we were trying to utilize half of the funding out of this so that, that's just a little less strain on the stormwater utility system, fees, because, we don't generate enough fees to do all the projects. So this would just, give that ratepayer a little relief. And then the fourth priority is we need definite some improvements within our network security and infrastructure upgrades. So these are things that your IT manager has identified to the city manager and I, that these are projects, upgrades that need to be completed to do two things. Number one, make sure the speed and reliability is there for, both, city staff, and then the free Wi-Fi, and then number two, security. Those are just things that, we would talk about in an open forum of what those kind of upgrades are, but this is money, again, as if you go back and you look at the original ARPA spending categories, definitely falls right within those items. And then the final couple of projects, these are all Parks and Rec items. These are all items that, definitely need to be completed. If they're not funded through ARPA, then it would be funded by the general fund as a transfer to Fund 317. So again, this just provides relief to the general fund, because this could mean an increase in millage rate potentially just to fund, that project. And then the final item down there is contingency. We have no idea until we put something out to bid exactly how much something's going to be, but I can tell you as we go through some of the slides coming up here, we've seen prices double just in concrete in the last year, and a lot of the projects that are listed on here are a lot of concrete. So that will drive the cost plus labor. And a reminder that if these are all projects that y'all are good with, the sooner that we are able to move forward to come back with, start doing contracts for this work, the better, because it obviously takes time to complete, and we've got to get bids or go after piggybacks, et cetera, to get those these things lined up. And if we're looking to put a bid out, then you're looking at probably 4 to 6 months just to get that turnaround. So, time is of the essence on everything ARPA related.
So John, on those, I'm going to assume that all or part of them, if we do all these with ARPA money, because we're talking about $1.5 million more in projects than we have ARPA money there. So
Yes, sir.
okay.
Question, clarification, I'm sure I'm correct, if we're okay to,
Go ahead. Workshop. Let's do it as we go.
we're not permitted to put any of this in reserves,
No, sir.
correct? So the idea of taking any of these dollars as some sort of a revenue stabilization fund would not be appropriate?
No, sir. We must spend 100% of the funds by December 31st of 2026, or we return it to the federal government.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question about that actually, and I feel like I already know the answer. But if we don't spend part of the money, we have to return the part we don't spend. We wouldn't have to return all of it, correct?
So let's just say that we haven't spent it all by September 30th of 2026. Then as we're coming up into the final budget hearing, for, the 26-27 year, I would definitely be giving y'all suggestions on how to spend that money in the next few weeks, so that we're not returning anything to the federal government.
Well, obviously that. I was saying, but if we were to, not spend $500,000,
It's not.
we
an
don't want
all
to
or
send that
nothing
back.
thing.
It's not all or nothing. We're not going to
Correct.
send them back $9 million if we don't spend.
That's correct. It's only what you hadn't spent.
I want to make sure of that.
Actually, so we're required to report annually to the U.S. Treasury everything that we've done, so that, it's not a waiting until 2026 to report it. We're reporting it as we go. It's only annually.
Yeah, I thought I knew the answer, but I don't trust. Don't trust it if I don't know for sure.
What we were trying to do here, I know there were some concerns, there was discussion about the ambulance and what would be the right thing to spend money on at the May workshop. We were trying to do is get you projects that we felt fairly certain we could get done in time, that were of urgent enough need, that they were, because one of the questions, things are going up in value. So these projects, if they're funded through ARPA funds, free up some of the general fund dollars that we had in fund balance in other areas that allow us to do other projects. It may be that some of those general fund things we hold on and wait until things cost less money. There may be projects that aren't urgent, that aren't worth, if it was $1 million project 2 years ago and now it's a $3 million project and it's not an urgent maintenance thing, it's hard to come recommend to you, you spend $3 million on something, you may want to wait a little while and see if the prices come down. But these were projects that could get you timely stuff done, that were needs that were identified. The reason you see the top three, the public works projects get you, that's the majority of it. The bigger cost items are these issues where you have drainage problems. You have a road that's failing. The road is going to get in worse shape. It'll cost more money the longer we wait to get out there and fix it. The security of our computer network. These are all things that while we have this money available are worthwhile doing now. But that does then free up some money that had been in the general fund we might be able to use for other projects going forward, or for, as Councilman Tremont mentioned, the revenue stabilization on the larger scale.
Also want to just throw out there, for anybody who's listening who's concerned about our reserves, one of the things that we did when we went into COVID shutdown is we put some serious austerity measures in place. And in doing so, nobody knew how long we'd be shut down. We knew that we wouldn't be providing services. We also didn't know how our income would be affected. But because of that and the austerity measures that we put into place then, our reserves are pretty healthy. So that is not an actual concern, although it would be nice. It's not really a concern because we're actually in better shape than we were 2 years ago as far as our reserves.
Right.
Just a comment.
One more quick question, just the ball field lamp replacement. That would be to replace existing lighting bulbs that we have. That's not adding anything new to any of the other fields, correct?
As it was explained to me, most of it would be the bulb, but there would be some fixtures.
Okay.
So it's LED upgrades. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah,
because
no new
obviously we've
poles or
had
anything.
the fall ball issue, which has been well conversed through my email inbox. So, okay, thank you.
That's design in out years, but we've had some conversations that even lighting those fields isn't going to be enough additional capacity to actually run a fall baseball league. There's more parks capacity we've got to build to get to the point where you could actually run a full baseball season.
Yes. So the premise of all these projects would be, these are all things that we've identified. We would try and, see which ones we could push through the first, the fastest, so that we could spend up to our allocation. So, the ball field might be able to be done in 3 months, but the amphitheater seating might not be able to be done in, 3.5 years. So, that would be off the table immediately, on a project we would complete. So it has to be something that once we get the go, it's got to be completed within the time frame of ARPA.
Well, personally, I'd like to see it all done by December of 2024, but that's just me.
Yep.
Wayne, what do you need for these particular projects? This funding's already available, right?
Correct. It's in our
So
accounts.
we're not having to wait for a fiscal year of any
No,
kind.
sir.
We can get going on all this stuff. And on some of it, I know we already have, but
They would come back through you as the contracts.
so what do you need from us to start expediting some of these projects so we can get them done and checked off?
I would come to you on July 19th with a budget amendment, allocating the money towards these items, and then that would give us the go-ahead in purchasing, either to go after an RFP, RFQ, piggyback, and then the city attorney's office, they know that the funding's there to push through a contract.
It's like a plan.
Okay, so Robin, add that to the July.
Why not doing them all?
Okay, so we will. I will work with the two
Record
directors.
reflect that
and-
nobody argued with you, Scott.
Yep.
If we got to spend it all, we might as well go ahead and get it done. Sooner the better. The
Yep.
residents get the benefit from it the longer period of time. So
Start now.
Thank you all. So on our future assumptions, this is something that, is basically, for, as we've been putting this budget together, a lot of our items are changing on a weekly basis. So items affecting our operating funds, consumer price index. I've listened to the last couple of days, quite a few economists, talking about the state of the economy. And, this is just so cyclical. I mean, this isn't new, it tends to happen, every, 10 to 20 years. So, we're just in that little, increase. Right now, unfortunately, we have, not only inflation issues, but we also have, supply issues. So that's just something we've not tend to have at one time. So, when you put in the inflation plus supply, it's just making, if this was any other year, we probably could have gotten it done by the end of this year. But we can in this current economy. The Florida minimum wage, we keep talking about that. Fuel trends, I'm going to show you something regarding that. Unemployment. We are at some of the lowest unemployment percentages we've ever been at. That's what's having us have such a hard time in attracting staff. Talking to finance directors from throughout the state, it's everywhere. All municipal governments are having a hard time attracting qualified professionals, laborers, etc. Updating all the allocations. We talked about the cost allocation fee study. So that has been put out there. The contract task order went out a week ago. So Rafa Tillis has started the process to put together the cost allocation, and that will come before you all for review the end of August. And then once the cost allocation is done, then that's when they start working on the utility rate studies. So, and then once they're done with the utility rate studies, then that's when they look at the impact fees. So all of this work with Rafa Tillis will take 6 to 7 months to complete, and you'll be hearing from Rafa Tillis throughout that process.
There's a big slide with a lot of stuff, but the bottom line is stuff costs a whole lot more money. But we're doing what we can through looking at rates. I think council's direction on doing a methodical approach to looking at rates, whether it's individual fees for service or rates for our larger services like utilities and stormwater, is a solid approach to go forward, and that's the direction we're taking, is what council said to do that going forward. We're looking at vacancies, we're looking at our how we handle vacancy rate budgeting. So we're looking at efficiencies in the process, the departments the budgets that we've seen submitted, and we don't have everything. That's what you'll be getting at the July meeting. There weren't enhancements added to the departments this year. This is a keep things going, deal with the inflation. But that's a bunch of words on a slide that say we expect stuff to cost a whole bunch of money, and we're doing everything we can to try to figure out ways to be fair at the charges and keep our costs down while we're dealing with them going forward. So that's my short version of all those words.
Wayne, we talked about, you and I have discussed in the past on volunteer programs within each department. I'm looking at the success of our VIPs over the last number, however many years I've been doing this for. And these folks are doing it in one of the most dangerous professions around, and we've got 80-year-olds that are out there able to handle the workload. So my question is there have you seen programs in any of your other experiences, anything around the state or the country where Parks and Recs, they've got their VIPs, if you will, the fire department, and so forth, finance, to take off some of the workload and still, but still be effective and not having to pay for more personnel as needed.
Those programs do exist in other services besides police support services, and there would be things that we could look into. We talked briefly about certain ones, making sure that it limits risk, but there are other areas of government where you can find volunteer support.
The VIPs themselves do courier service for the city throughout, not just for PD. And when we mention volunteers, this is a great time to put in a plug, because we actually have roughly half the amount of VIPs and volunteers in police services that we did 3 years ago, for various reasons. And anybody out there that's interested, stepping up, let us know. We'd love to have you.
And then finally, our insurances. We haven't seen any change in our health insurance. We're still on the projection for a 10% increase, but we have received word that I had previously stated 15% for property casualty. That's now been bumped up to 25%. So the property, there's twofold. cars are costing more than they did yesterday, so that's the driving force with auto. And then, the trend in property insurance alone in Florida, everyone, if they've gotten their renewal of late, has probably seen a pretty significant increase. So we have to follow the same thing when we go after market reinsurance, et cetera. So we hope it comes in less, but that's probably just alone, that's $400,000 increase just to go to 25% increase. Okay. I think this slide, on the consumer price index is pretty telling. But something that really is a tell on this is if you look on the far right, in the orange, which is the southern region, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, that area. So you can see that the southern area exceeds that of the nation. So, the southern is at 9.2% increase over 12 months versus nationally it's only an average of 8.7. So we are seeing, definitely increased cost within Florida over other areas. So to kind of put it into perspective, a 10 by 10 concrete patio, 4-inch thick, that you and I might put in our backyard. A little over a year ago, that pad would have cost $446. To do it in the day's concrete prices, $872.30. So when you just look at just one your and my patio in your backyard versus where we're doing sidewalks throughout the entire city, the magnitude of what we're doing versus what we would do personally is it's not double or triple. I mean, it's 100-fold.
So we're talking CPI. We're not buying groceries to feed people. We're buying
Correct.
construction materials,
Correct.
wages, things that are much higher impact than the normal CPI.
Yeah, so transportation is up 21%. So, but then when you look at manufacturing, that's up in the 20%. So then just the fuel to get it from the factory to the distribution point to the final destination, it's all a domino effect. That fuel, the fuel that we're paying at the pump, when you put it, to a Walmart, an Amazon, a FedEx, the costs are just far greater than you and I. So that takes us to the average gas price. So then if I look at, we have 113 gas vehicles in our fleet, 283 diesels. So that's a total of 396 overall mobile equipment. In 2021, we paid $475,000 in fuel. If I look at what the projection working with your fleet manager for that same, gallon usage for the year, we're looking at $813,000, an increase of $337,000. So again, if I look at my little bitty car, it costs me an extra $25 a week, $1,300 a year. So when you look at it, the entire city fleet versus us individually, it's a much bigger scale. So, as Wayne said, everything we're doing to operate the city has increased across the all operations from, the chemicals at the water sewer plant, everything that we do to mark the fields for Parks and Rec, flipping the light switches on.
Funny how all this started when you started your job as city manager, Wayne.
Stopped hurricanes from coming.
I give you that.
Yeah. So again, but with everything going on, I will say that the unemployment rate, that's great. I mean, if you look with everything that happened 2.5 years ago with COVID, when we were pushing 15% unemployment, and now we're at 3% unemployment, and you still go to restaurants or stores or whatnot, everyone has help wanted signs. So the demand's there for additional workers, just the workers are not there. So that just goes to show you that just the number of people that, were towards the end of their career and said, enough's enough, I'm just going to go ahead and retire. So there's been a lot of employees leave the job market. So, it's a good thing. You can see we haven't had unemployment that low now since January of 2020. Okay. So for some good news, we've talked about some bad bad things in terms of, the cost of, fuel, the cost of concrete. Well, the property appraiser released Friday the preliminary numbers. So remember, June 1st, they released the pre-preliminary numbers. By July 1st, statutorily, they have to release the preliminary numbers. So when we first started this, my office, based on historical, we were led to believe that we might have just around a 7% increase in property values year over year. So if you go back, that's what we were reporting March of this year. When I stood up here last month, we were at, I believe it was 12.4%, and now including new construction, we're at 13.05%. So we went from $3.992 billion to $4.513 billion in taxable value within Port Orange. Of that, we saw new construction of just over $100 million. And then all of us that, for those that own homes here within Port Orange, then the year over year increase, for existing properties increased a little over $400 million. So, remember statutorily, if you're homesteaded, it can't increase more than 3%. If you're non-homesteaded, it can't increase more than 10%. So where we're seeing the drive on this increase from prior year, it's just the magnitude of the home sales. So you'll see in a upcoming slide that, just the amount of home sales that we've had within Port Orange is just, is what's really leading this increased taxable value. If you go back on this slide, we'll just kind of show you where the median home sales price is. All of this came from Zillow. It's amazing what's all on the web. So you can see that since 2013, the median home sale was $150,000, and in 10 years it's increased to $335,000.
Double your investment in 9 years.
There you go. That's another very good news for those that live here within Port Orange. And then this just kind of reiterates the same thing. You can see that, as we were coming out of the Great Recession of 2008 through 2012, we had roughly $2.4 billion in taxable value, and then we've had all this great growth here in Port Orange over the last 10 years. Plus, people remodeling their homes, new commercial. We have seen, that increase to where we are now at the $4.5 billion. So this is a good slide. What I like about the next slide is this just goes to show the way, you as the city council has, diversified Port Orange. If you look at Edgewater, Deltona, their residential is pushing 90%. So we have a much better mix in that only 67.7% of Port Orange is residential, so that when you do see dips in taxable value due to like we did in 08 foreclosures and whatnot, you're a little bit more isolated in that a Home Depot, a Lowe's, a Publix, they won't see that big dip in property values like a residential home might. So this is a very good slide, a very good mix for any local government. Kind of going back along the lines of where we've come from and where we're going. This slide has one extra column in it. I just wanted to put in there that there are 2 apartment complexes that will be coming online either the end of this calendar year or next calendar year, Eden and Atlantic. So both of those, when they come online, looking at those 2 taxable values, that will bring in close to $500,000 in additional property tax at the existing millage rate.
So the emphasis is to make sure they're CO'd by December 31st?
Absolutely.
And fish too.
And those numbers came by community development, provided information regarding the number of units and the other newer apartment complexes. So taking in, the per unit taxable value is how we derived at these rates. So it definitely, until the property appraiser officially appraises it, these are obviously guesstimates. Okay. Your historical millage rate, you can see, from this slide over the last, few years, our millage rates have been up and down. This just goes to show that we've set the millage rates on an annual basis to cover operating costs. We have had savings over the last few years, which have contributed to increased fund balance. But your millage rates have definitely kept up with the increased cost of operations. And again, your two major driving forces within the general fund are your Parks and Rec and Public Safety departments. Your general fund tax analysis. So this slide just kind of wraps everything up that we've shown you. This gives you in one snapshot where our taxable value has come from the last 10 years, your tax levy. You can see in there the cost allocation. We didn't really have anything in there, a slide previous on this. And the reason for it is that we want Raffatilis to come in here and confirm what we're charging your utility funds is justifiable. So they will be coming back to tell you whether or not that this is a sound design. And then finally, it also shows you the fund balance. So as we stated to you when we met with James Moore and Company, your auditor, we did provide to you information regarding your fund balance, and that's something that the city manager will be meeting with everybody on prior to the July workshop, so that we can give you a status, as I stated to you, you would have before we went into set the maximum millage. So I believe that's a very important conversation to have prior to our next workshop. But point blank, your general fund is sound. Everything that y'all have set up the last couple of years is working, and we've definitely positioned ourselves with a very healthy general fund. The next slide, you'll just see that, again, every year when you set the maximum millage and then you set the final millage, you have definitely set a millage rate that's covering your cost. There is no, monies being set aside for, some kind of, fund for future rainy days. It's not there. Everything that's within the general fund within this year's budget is covering the cost. Not only to remember is that we're covering the cost, but we're covering the cost of capital projects that y'all have approved over the last couple of years that, we have to make sure that as these projects are completed, that the funds are transferred from the general fund to the appropriate, whether it's Fund 306, 317, that the fund was completed on. So that's something that, your finance staff and I have now been able to rectify and reconcile, and that will be completed, as we stated when we met with Zach, before the end of July. Okay. Citywide fees, I think I pretty much covered that already. We as staff are very excited about Raffatilis. They're getting ready to send to us their first go of all the required data from all of our financial systems. They'll be meeting not only with me, the finance director, they'll be meeting with your public works team. They'll be meeting, from the city attorney to the city manager, anyone that has anything to do with, the allocation across all funds, there will be a meeting. So this isn't something that just finance is doing. This is definitely a comprehensive study that is needed in a city of this size.
Wayne, I'd mentioned a few weeks ago that I wanted us to have a discussion out of our workshop about actually putting on paper the policy of reviewing every fee for appropriateness every 5 years. I just wanted to reiterate why I feel like that's important, because last time we went through the Great Recession, we cut a little close to the bone on some things. And I think we had to. It was the Great Recession. But we're still paying the cost of the deferred maintenance from that today. And we are, and we're still working through some of those things ourselves. But when you defer fees, then you slap people with a wild increase to catch up. And in some cases, sometimes you get cold feet, and the wild increase, you cut that back a little bit, and you still don't get caught up because it's still a very large increase, but you're trying to be sensitive of the people that have to pay those monies. So I think and a number of times we've reviewed fees and decided we were fine where we're at. And that's why it has to be done. I don't want, the other part of that is our residents today, if we're undercharging, our residents of tomorrow are going to end up supplementing what the residents of today get. And people should be able to pay their own way all the time. That's why I feel like it's appropriate that we do this. Incremental approach, small increases from time to time, as opposed to really socking it to people because somebody one day said, hey, I want to hold the line on fees for the sake of holding the line on fees. There are costs to operating the city and costs to providing a level of service and providing a lifestyle that we talked about. John, you did a good job of talking about the mix of business to residents. Those businesses pay the bulk of taxes, and that's one of the reasons why we have a millage rate is usually among the lowest in the county. Now, when you have more businesses, though, it does create some traffic headaches and nightmares, but that's a trade-off. That's a quality of life trade-off. How much of that we want to bear. Those are things that this council and councils before have always struggled with, and making sure that we maintain a balance that makes sense. But at the end of the day, I honestly believe the decisions that we make every year when it comes to budget time go directly to the quality of life that our residents expect. And all of us may have a different expectation of what that might be, but the bottom line is that that's what we're trying to address, is making sure that we maintain a quality of life that our residents expect. It might be public safety, it might be parks, it might be roads, it might simply be water, but one way or the other, that's the importance, I'll get off my soapbox here, of the decisions we make.
And I do agree with the mayor that I think there needs to be a very clear and well understood city protocol or policy, if we want to call it that, on how rates and fees are reviewed, why they're reviewed, the frequencies. But in addition to that, I think we need to also make sure that we're always updating that to be in accordance with what the state legislature has done with regulations to impact fees. And we need to be able to know for our residents, or our residents need to be able to know. In fact, it should be something that's readily available on our site and kept updated, is because you hear a lot of talk about impact fees in the community, but people don't really understand what that means. What can they be used for? How frequently can they be increased or decreased, and all that different kind, and what percentage of increases is allowable and stuff like that. And we need to have something that's detailed but yet not overly convoluted, and it's really available in that layman's terminology, so that any of our residents that ever had a question about how impact fees work and how are they set and what are the state regulations and stuff, should be able to go to something and within a page or two read that thing and go, okay, well, I understand that now. I didn't understand it before, that type of a thing. So, and I know there's been some 2 years in a row, I think there's been some legislative changes, maybe 3.
I think 2 years ago they put a 10% cap on, and also how many years in a row you can do that.
Right, and is it every 4?
I think it's 10% once every 3 years, I believe.
Yeah, but anyway, that's all those things are things that we need to kind of be able to review from time to time. And I'll be honest with you, since some of those changes that the mayor and I are talking about right now, I haven't kind of looked at that again holistically, because I know that this time is coming up soon for us. So.
So Mayor, part of Ralph Attilas's charge was to help me put together the master city fee schedule. So within the master fee schedule, which would be a resolution adopted by council, it would actually have in there exactly what you're stating, the frequency that it's reviewed. But then if you're looking at utilities, you would actually have in there the 5-year rolling, because it's a 5-year plan.
Mm-hmm.
And that 5-year plan, I typically have always put that right in the fee resolution. So you know for the next 5 years, if you adopted those utility rates, what it was going to be for those years. And then it's something that, you know, especially, you know, for here, you would be updating it every other year. You know, it gets kind of cost prohibitive to do utility rate study every year, but if you're keeping up with it every other year, then it doesn't cost us as much as we are having to pay this time because we haven't done one in so many years. So to me, that's just to me the best practice. That review and, you know, is in that fee resolution, so that it's my guide to make sure I do that, so that I'm presenting it to you as part of the annual budget process.
Us and every council that follows us.
Yep. Jonathan, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, you don't know, right, but how many different, when we're talking about impact fees that the state does regulate, how many different categories of impact fees as far that exist? Is it just the 3?
We have parks, transportation, fire, library, water, sewer, and I just say, in my session today, or yesterday, when they went over the new legislative updates, I now have to now go down to how the fee, you know, report annually how the fee was determined, whether it was by square footage, fixed, was it residential, non-residential. I mean, it's like 5 different categories per impact fee, which means we've got to change our entire accounting system just to track it.
One of the important things though with the impact fees is what you were getting at, is they can only be used for the impact of the new growth. So as we reach build out, they become less and less important as a revenue stream to Port Orange.
Right.
And your utility rates become the key, because that's what's maintaining your system. There are still some critical areas out there. We still have the Karasi land and the rest of Woodhaven that will generate a substantial amount of impact fees, and you know, the rec and key parks are being paid for. Every residential development is generating a good bit of impact fees that we're using to pay for our recreation facilities, and our fire training facility was paid for with fire impact fees. So they're a critical source for a lot of our capital and growth. And so although we're within a 10-year or so window of not having very many of them, they're going to be really important during that period to get right and have people understand what we can do with them.
I'm going to ask a question I should probably already know the answer to. Impact fees, they apply to infill and redevelopment, or only to development?
Infill and do.
There
Couldn't
are
have been
credits
anything
sometime
there,
if you
right.
tear something down and it already has paid impact fees, you get credits. But if you're building something new and increasing the impact, you're paying the fee.
Yeah, so if you know, I know this comes up frequently in my past, if you tear a house down and you remove sewer and water, then that could reset, you have to repay those as well.
Okay.
So Mayor, Council, as it stands right now, as we finish building the budget, solid waste will be increased by 4.3% at the current time, come October,
Do that number again, I'm sorry.
4.3%.
Solid waste.
Yes, sir. That's based on the, you know, the current CPI. Stormwater has no increase. Water, wastewater will have a 5% increase. There will be no planned increases for building permits nor any of the impact fees. But all these fees will be coming back by Raffatilis to let you know if those are sufficient or not. So, you know, we're saying 5% right now for water, wastewater, but they could come back in November and say that it should have been 7.2. Just remember, there has not been an increase in water, wastewater rates since 2017. Okay. So what are our next steps? Obviously, we've talked about the citywide fee review. I have submitted some potential ordinance changes to the city attorney's office as it relates to budgeting, capital improvement plan, and purchasing. One of the things that I was working on with the assistant city manager is that capital improvement plan, where we typically bring it to you the first meeting in August. But we already have brought that to you. We talked about CIP at the May workshop. We've somewhat talked about it at this workshop. We're going to talk about it at the July workshop. So there's just, unless the council says otherwise, and speaking with the city attorney and the city manager, there's not necessarily a reason statutorily to have a separate meeting just to approve your capital improvement plan, that it can just be built into your regular budget on public hearings that we do in September, knowing full well we've talked about it at every last budget workshop.
It's a legacy ordinance from the 80s that we don't know
81,
why
yeah.
existed. I don't know of any other city that does it. You still have to adopt the CIP, but the ability to if you change the millage rate or ask us to reduce things, if we have until you adopt the CIP along with the rest of the budget, we can use that to find funds as well as we're working in the month of August. So it would allow you some flexibility if you need to work with your general fund tax rates. And so it doesn't serve any purpose. You still have to adopt it, and it allows you more flexibility to do it with part of the major budget in September.
Correct. And then the only other item within the budget ordinance is kind of clarifying the city managers versus council authority. So it talks about being able to transfer between programs, but we've talked about it, it should actually say fund. So the city manager has authority to change it within a fund, but he can't transfer it from the general fund to Fund 317. But if you read the current ordinance, it would say that because of program, well, Lynn has programs in multiple funds in Public Works, that you can technically transfer it. So we just want to clean up that language so it specifically states CM has ability to transfer within the fund, and only City Council has authority to transfer it between funds. We're working on the updated chart of accounts. Our next budget workshop, which will be your all fund operating review, will be July 25th at 5:30. Your fee study, your first fee study review by Raffatilis is August 30th. Our maximum millage, it's actually later than normal. It's going to be August 2nd, but just know that the property appraisers I've had to promise the property appraiser by 8:30 the next morning it will be submitted to the state of Florida as part of TRIM. So, so got to make sure that's done. And then I'm still putting it on the calendar, but July 19th would be the first ordinance hearing for the change to the capital improvement ordinance, and then August 2nd would be the second hearing. So if for some reason you as council do not approve the first hearing of it, then I will definitely put it on the August 2nd agenda. And as a reminder, our two public hearings are Wednesday, September 7th and Wednesday, September 21st, both at 5:30. And again, as the city manager stated, that's where you would be approving, on the first hearing, the tentative millage, the tentative budget. And when you're approving that tentative budget, you're approving operating, capital, and CIP. So it's everything. And then the September 21st, that's when you're approving the proposed budget. And 3 days before that proposed budget will be in the newspaper, so that the individuals that still receive a newspaper, they're still receiving that ad. Okay.
Hold that thought
Yes,
for
sir.
just 1 second. What was the issue we had last year with that? Was it last year or the year before? With the paper? The year before? Okay. I remember that. And you had
Yes.
the same look on your
It
face
was in
that year as you do now, right?
2018 and 19.
Okay.
I know that the legislature, I don't know if it's been signed yet, but the legislature passed some relief on notification on outlets that we can use or not use in an effort to save money. We'll see how that plays out as well, but for now, the traditional tried and true is the traditional tried and true.
Yeah, they used to require us in finance to, and Lynn probably remembers, the full cost of accounting for solid waste. We had to do that for years, put that in the newspaper, and they finally said, well, you can get away from that. So we haven't had to do that for probably 10 years now, but we still have to do the budget ads, even though And I asked, well, how many people actually get the newspaper? Very few, and you can't go into Facebook and, go to the News Journal and see the ad unless you pay for it, a digital subscription. So it's becoming, rarer and rarer on who's actually seeing these ads that cost thousands of dollars. And I'm legally required to do it. If I don't do it, and it's not in the package that goes to the state of Florida in October, they can withhold state revenues. So it's not worth the.
Okay, Robin, can you put get the slide back up? It's the schedule. I just wanted to emphasize a couple things. So that all fund budget review, July 25. That's the night. So we do this every year. Our enterprise fund, special revenue fund. We haven't reached the point yet because we're still putting the final pieces together. We haven't seen state revenue numbers, but generally you don't see problems balancing those other funds that are fee-based. They work out. So that's the meeting where you sit there and you look at, here's what all the departments that use the general fund have asked for, here's what everything we think cost, and here's how much revenue, and that's where you kind of get a feel for, is the tax rate where it's at, lower or higher, going to be necessary to pay for all that. So that's what's coming up on July 25. We have a shade meeting the Monday before that, which is the 18th. So we have a full NAGE contract, which is about half of our workforce. We've got a couple of articles open for fire, police lieutenants. We do have the actuarial studies in. We are meeting later this week to go over what they are and how that impacts the budget going forward. We're at about $13 an hour on our base pay, so we're still $2 below. Even though we're on pace with going forward, we're still big dollars away from getting to 15, and the market's kind of moving to 15 faster. So you're going to see, what we try to do is balance it out. You got the harsh reality of a bunch of stuff costs a bunch more money. We've got state, voter mandated pay. We have employees that we need to be competitive and take care of that are the critical factor for everything that we do here. But we do have the benefit of a fee study coming. We have the benefit of better property values and some new development that'll help contribute to the cost of doing these things. So we are available to meet with any of you between now and the shade meeting, between now and the 25th meeting on anything. If you have things you want to make sure we get to you so that you have that information to help make decisions, let me know what they are so that we don't leave something out that you want to have on that night to help out. So I don't have any vacation scheduled, so I'll be around. Enjoy your next 2 weeks where some of you will be in and out of town. But if you need something from us, we're here to get it to you so that when you sit down that night, you've got what you need to give us direction going forward.
Thank you, John. Thank you. I think
Thank you.
you've done an excellent job of laying the groundwork. You got to frame the picture before you look at what's inside of it. One thing that I am itching to know, and I know y'all are still working on it, is a simple, I know the word is not simple, turn the page. What did we do last year? What's it going to cost to do it this year, along with our pay obligations? The sooner we find out that number, the sooner we can really roll our sleeves up as a council and get to work, because I know the impact in my life, just simply going to the gas pump, paying for my homeowner's insurance. I know that those dollars will cost more. This is, for me, a balancing act. I need to make this city run and provide the quality of life people expect. At the same time, I know that while that's going to cost more, the people who have to pay for that, everything else is costing more for them also. So this is going to be a difficult budget year, but the sooner that we have an idea, how many more dollars are we going to have to spend this coming budget to get what we got this year, and what that percentage increase is, the sooner that we have some idea what that is, the sooner you can get that to the five of us, the better. I'd appreciate that.
And we're trying really hard on efficiencies, and because the 500 people that provide those services are why the quality is here, and the best we can do to provide that for those 500 people, we're trying to make sure the efficiencies and the processes are there so it gives you more flexibility for the employees.
Maybe we start looking at being innovative on some things like, do we have vehicles that can run on LP gas? Our trash trucks do. Who knows? I don't know. I don't think that we can fix that problem in the next 30 days, but over the next year, 2 or 3, innovation is a wonderful thing if we take advantage of the things that we know are out there. And it's okay to cheat and see what's working for everybody else and steal those ideas, because those are usually the best ones.
Yeah, Councilman Foley and I were talking about being that he's a musician, that if you look at us like a band, all the greatness doesn't come from one person bringing every song to the band.
Yeah.
You know,
Except for my band.
but the more people that have we're more than happy to find great ideas that will work in Port Orange. We don't have to invent them all. I can cover somebody else's song.
I love it when I get to do a Bob Ford reference. Bob always talked about sometimes being on the leading edge would lead us on the bleeding edge. We don't have to be the ones to try it first, but somebody out there tried it. We can learn from what they did. So we don't need to be on the bleeding edge to innovate. With that, questions and comments. We'll start with you, Reed.
Just in terms of additional information, Wayne, we had a lot of focus on vacancies last year, and we added that vacancy rate into the budget to kind of get where we got. It would be important to me that that's included again this year. Where are we on vacancies this year versus last year? What is the rate that we're the assumed vacancy rate for this year? Is it changing? Is it the same? That's some information that I want to have again this year. So I'll just make a note of that now, so we can make sure we have everything we need to make these decisions.
Okay.
Jace, what do you got?
Yeah, Wayne, you always know my position. I continue to sing the same tune, not as eloquently as Mr. Reed over here, but it's gonna be at the same note, nevertheless. Would like for consideration. I know we've discussed that. Just wanted to get it out there. I've talked about the revenue stabilization fund. And we've utilized our reserves in the past. They've always been generally used for capital projects, and I've never been a proponent of using reserve funds for ongoing expenses. That being said, and I'm still not going to suggest that. That being said, I'd like us to be looking at those cost increases of everyday business due to the rampant inflation and fuel prices, because we know that history has told us the inflation is not going to stay at this rate, and it's not going to stay this high. Neither will the fuel prices. How long, I don't know. But I'm always looking for anything to buy us some time. And while we do have a healthy reserve, I don't want to abuse that, and I think we've done a good job not doing that. But I'd like to just keep that in your hip pocket going forward. Thanks, sir.
And no hurricanes.
No hurricanes.
Scott?
So, twice tonight I've heard this phrase revenue stabilization fund. What are we talking about? Are we talking about something different than the reserve fund?
No, I'm just, the way I'm using it is to stabilize the use of our expenditures, using reserves to do that for the purposes of while we have inflation, while we have higher prices. I look at that as sort of one time, because I don't see those as being ongoing. I don't see us having for the next 3 to 5 years $5 gas prices. I don't
So
see
you're
the
not talking about
inflation.
actually creating another fund?
No.
You're
I'm
talking about using money
interchangeable
out of the reserve,
term. Yeah.
Out of the reserve. Okay, I
Yeah.
just was
Just to
same time I heard
stabilize
that,
our-
I was like, man, I thought we were talking about a fund
Yeah.
that I wasn't.
No.
I was wondering where it was going.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
excuse
no
me for
No
that.
worries.
Yeah.
So we're talking about reserve funds.
Yeah.
So what?
I'm talking about using them as a stabilization of our revenue.
for non-ongoing expenses.
For
Single one-time use.
Yes,
stuff.
and I'm taking it in a different approach. It is sort of ongoing, but I'm talking about let's say the increase of gas prices. Let's look at the last 3 to 5 years, how much they've been. The average cost that it's been. Well, my gosh, we're looking at right now $300,000. I don't know for this next year. Well, I'm not interested in factoring a millage rate for something that's likely going to be a 1-year scenario where it's $300,000 more this year, but it's going to go drastically down next year. So I'm talking about stabilizing those expenditures for this one-time year. That make sense?
It's something that I think Deland did last year with salaries, when they were allocating money out of their fund balance to capital, quit doing it and use it. It's a hedge because you're believing in the future your ongoing costs that are spiking will come back down. So if you, the one thought process we had related to the wages issue, trying to get to the 15 and higher quicker, would be if the fund balance is high, then you can cover some of that cost. Well, John was showing you the apartment complexes and the fish and the Woodhavens that are coming in the future. You're taking a chance.
So far doing that though.
Correct.
'Cause wages don't decline.
That's exactly the point I was about to make. You
Yeah,
can have
and
this
I'm not, and
discussion
I've
with.
been pretty clear. I'm not asking it for wages. I'm just talking about the increased cost of doing business.
You got to. It
So
can be
you're-
done. You just got to be careful.
You're referring to some of the turn the page costs that Don's talking about. Turn the page. Fuel was this much this year.
Correct.
Then what you're
The
then what
added
you're
cost
doing is you're
the added cost due to the massive inflation that we're dealing with and the fuel prices that are not going to be, more than likely, not going to be extremely long-term.
right.
Yeah, and that's a tricky thing. I mean, I
It
kind of
is.
get it. It's almost, in concept, it's almost kind of like the smoothing effect that they talk about with the pensions, except for the fact that, we're trying to guess something that's quite unusual, not even 50% through a presidential administration, where a lot of these policies seem to be driving these trends. I don't know that those trends are going to get any better for a little while, and so
And maybe
that's a
not.
tricky
That's why
thing,
it's,
yeah.
hey, let's.
But I follow where you're going now. I appreciate you.
And we'll need to, one of the things that we're going to be bringing back to you is that you heard him briefly talk about fund balance. And so the auditor presented what's actually sitting in fund balance, but some of those funds have been allocated to capital projects. They just haven't been transferred. So it's important for you to know exactly what that number is, and then you can decide what comfort level you are with that number. There was discussion, is it 30, what number do you want it to be at? But we need to, what we're in the process of doing, and the benefit of having the stable finance department we have today is we've got people who are qualified to get in there and take a look at it and tell you exactly what you have unallocated. This is unallocated money. You can choose what you want to do with. Some of those funds that were in the auditor's fund balance number have actually been said they're sitting there. That's where they are, but they've been allocated to projects that are on your capital list that we all believe are going to get done. That's just where the money just didn't get moved to the other account. So when we give you that number, it'll be easier to give policy direction on how much do you want to use of that to assist, whether it's a smoothing or other projects.
So my thoughts would be very similar, I think, to what everybody else is already mentioning. Is we need to continue to aggressively pursue efficiencies as well as collaboration. There may be some things out there where we can collaborate with some of our neighboring communities to pair some projects together. I know we talked briefly and mentioned that in past meetings, and there are some opportunities for us to maybe be able to do some projects and bundle things or piggyback things that allow us to do that, to not only try to advance some projects getting done as soon as possible, but also maybe have some savings there, which would be great if we could do both. As far as like the ARPA projects, I say full speed ahead on that. I mean, the sooner we can get those projects green lighted, moving forward in the bidding process and get them executed, the quicker that the taxpayers see the return value through use, if nothing else, of those projects, right? So,
We're competing against everybody else with
Yeah.
ARPA dollars to get
That's
things
right,
done
yep.
too. So yeah, you're absolutely right, Scott.
We're gonna be
And
competing
that
for
actually-
materials.
That actually segues into my next thing there, is that because of that competition right now, one of the things we see in the market that's hurting us is or just the day in and day out maintenance of getting things done that we rely on contractors for. The concrete thing is one I think we beat to death. We put projects out there and you come in with a single bidder. That's not beneficial to the taxpayer.
No.
That's not in our favor in any way, shape, or form. So I think we're going to see that problem grow with paving and lots of infrastructure things. There's just so many cities now with all this ARPA money trying to get all these projects done. There's just not enough contractors and companies to do things. So we're going to have to look for some of this stuff, figuring out how to maybe bring some things in-house in order to get them done. Because one of the things, if you go back and you look at some of the lessons of our city for the past 20 years, is we've had times where, you know, we tried to pull back and hold off on getting things done, only to find out, like the mayor said earlier, you set yourself back exponentially. So instead of having, and I'm just throwing out round numbers, but instead of having, you know, 150 miles of sidewalk that needs to be done, now you've got 225 miles or whatever those numbers might be. I don't know what they are, but you know, most streets have got sidewalks on both sides. So if you got a mile long road, you got 2 miles of sidewalk that has to be maintained and things like that. So anyway, I just think there's a lot there, and I know that staff has a lot of work on their plate, but aggressively pursuing the efficiencies and the collaboration with other partners and cities, and looking to see what does need to be brought inside, not only for cost savings, but also staying up with the maintenance, the timeliness of getting that stuff done. It's a huge challenge, and it's a tough market with the unemployment the way it is. I get it. There's tons and tons of factors. I think we've touched on a lot of them. If we can go back for just one quick second on the impact. So where are we currently to date on the restrictions of how frequently we can adjust those impact fees?
We haven't done any of them in years, so we have the flexibility
So we
to
can
do them.
that's wide open on all of them, for all of us.
They're complex, but we have not done, I think the most recent one is
2005.
yeah, over 10 years ago. So
Parks was 1990s, transportation 2005, and fire 2005.
the 2005 was the most
17
recent
years
one. So
ago.
you,
16. Wow.
So we are definitely long overdue for that. We need to keep that in the forefront. We need to be moving forward on that. There needs to be an adjustment on those impact fees. There has to be, you know. And I get what they're for and how they have to be utilized, but still those rates, they don't marry up, so to speak, with the rate increases of everything else that we've done over the course of the period of time for the last 15, 20, 25 years. So we've got to get on that very, very soon.
We're not in the position that some cities are, that have had no growth for a long time and didn't change their impact fees because there's a cost associated with doing the study for that. So there are cities that are exploding in growth, and you can only, by state law, review that, change that impact fee by so much, only so often, and they will never, ever, ever be caught up, which is why we have to maintain the frequency so that we don't end up in that boat.
And does our decision to change an impact fee have to fall in the same budget calendar as the rest, or that can happen anytime throughout the course of the year? There's no obligation to get that done before September
that's correct.
30th. Okay.
We looked at the transportation impact fees early on when I got here, and I got with VCARD to make sure that we were, you want it defensible when you do this, because you've
Sure.
got to tie it to
Yeah.
the cost of what you're doing. And we looked at lane mile cost and worked it out and had it ready to go, and about the time we were ready to bring it forward to council, it was off budget cycle. That's when the recession, I timed that start here, and then with the recession, we never did implement it. And so that's probably, that was 2008 when that study was done. So all that work we did then, we would have to redo, but we were prepared to bring it as soon as we had it done. We had VCARD backing, we were ready to go, and I don't think any of the other fees have even been looked at or are considered since the 05
Got to
era.
make that a priority.
I agree.
Thank you.
Scott, you mentioned efficiency. Efficiency is not just about saving cost. It can also be about improving service. And we had one big one we put into place last year. Thank you, Lynn Stevens, with the street sweeping. Love to have some of those high impact efficiencies show up like that. Not only did it save us a good chunk of money, but the service level improved as well dramatically. So, those are all sorts of different opportunities.
And just while you're there, so I got to brag on these guys a little bit. So the street sweeper operators, so you put them out there and have them hit certain streets, and you say go, routine, hit each street evenly. The guys come back and work with our staff and say, well, this street we've gone every week. there's no leaves on it, we should probably go to this other street that we need to hit twice a week and skip this one. And so they're looking for efficiencies in streets by need. So not only are they out there doing it and making a difference, they're coming back and saying, I can get you twice as much done if you send me to the streets that have the bigger needs than the others. So, so that's the kind of people that you're looking for in your operation to take something that was better and then add on to it. So that's the kind of things that they're looking at in that department to help out.
I'll give you a big amen on that.
But those guys deserved it.
Indeed. Drew?
Well, Wayne, it's funny you mentioned that because Councilman Stone was talking about trends, and so you're predicting a trend, and with that, they're adapting to a trend because they're seeing less leaves or less clutter in certain neighborhoods and everything. So that the trends though, you predict or plan for that trend, and then they change. We can't come back and readjust. We set a budget based on this and whatever, and then that changes. So last year, I'm sure, when we were doing this last May, June, July, we had no idea where fuel prices were going to be May, June of 22, and here we are. That one we missed, because the prediction and it trends. So when those trends change, that's where we get ourselves in trouble. But looking at and you can't, like I said, we can only react to it. We can't really change the budget or the rules based on we're in the middle of the thing. So we have solid waste is going up 4.3, water and wastewater is, so we're again, we planned that when we made those resolution changes a couple years ago to do that, and that was a good thing. There's no increase in stormwater this year, which is good, but all these all these things are going up, and the one thing that worries me moving forward is the trend. If the real estate market, and I'm no expert, but I don't think it's going to change dramatically in this year, but if that plummets, then we're going into the next year and we're like, what are we going to do? Again,
It's not plummeting.
Well, you hope.
I'm telling you, it's not plummeting.
Not in Florida.
I know, but
The
if
growth
something
rate may
like that,
the growth rate may decline, but it's not going to decrease. Mark my words.
and we hope you're right. But when at one point that's going to happen. Whether we're up here or somebody else, and then you have to adjust to that because now you don't have the revenue. So it's going to be interesting to go through this and get some more information from you and plan these things moving forward, because it's going to be challenging to say the least, I think.
Just a couple more. We have the robot striping the ball fields, saving us money. We got the LED lights, saving some money. We're working on the street light shift over to FPL. There's probably more stories. I'll keep bringing them to you so you can hear. But there are the people out there are trying hard to find a way to provide the service at a lower cost, and I appreciate that. And that's why we support them when we're going to try to help them out with the wage rates when we bring that forward. So they're really out there. These are ideas that are coming from people that do this every day.
Don't you just love it when we ask for efficiencies, but then by the same breath, we're going to ask you for more ball fields and more lighting up and down Dunlawton to improve public safety and aesthetics, and it's going to make for a wonderful budget season. Wayne, you got anything else for us this evening?
No, sir, that's it.
Council, anything else?
I'd just like to say I agree with what Scott mentioned and everybody else. The ARPA funds, or the ARPA projects, let's make those a priority, and because we are going to be competing with everyone else, and so some of those bigger projects might be harder to do if we wait any length of time on that. So we got to move those forward.
Okay. With that, it's going to be a while before we get back together again. We've got a little homework to do. I just want to remind everybody, hey, Monday is July 4th. And starting at 5:30 here at City Center, the Kids Zone, food trucks, beer garden, classic car show, and of course fireworks on July 4th in Port Orange. So we want to remind everybody, love to see you all out here Monday evening. With that, have a good night, everybody.